Great. So it's the start of season 2. Oh my God, it's the start of season 2. Right. Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. While I'm blabbing away, if you want to write in the chat box where you're watching from in the world, then I think that'll be really wicked to sort of see everyone and where you're all from. So please drop a note in the chat box and say where you are. Today, I'm super excited to welcome two blooming wonderful human beings to open up season 2. We've got Andy Lambert, who's the director of Content Cal, and Martyn Sibley, founder of Purple Goat and about 400 million other things. Both Andy and Martyn are previous marketing meetup speakers. Andy has spoken in London, Martyn in Cambridge. So basically, you know that right here today, you are getting 2 pros. To speak briefly about each, Andy's been part of the team at Content Cal, the content creation and publishing tool since 2016. Over this time, Andy's seen the company grow from 0 to about 40,000 customers, which is frankly ridiculous. More importantly, though, than the achievement of 40,000 customers is how they've achieved it. Andy, from the beginning, has pursued a long-term strategy supporting communities, creating incredible content, and more importantly, just being an all-round really great chap. I feel lucky to surround myself with so many lovely people with the marketing meetup on a regular basis. And I firmly count Andy as one of these people. On a personal level, the man gives top quality hugs and it's just a joy to be around. And then there's Martyn. Martyn is quite simply one of the most amazing humans I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. You need to look no further than his email signature to see he's a busy man too. Martyn is the co-founder and CEO of Purple Goat, world changer, as in just by being himself. Inclusion captain at Disability Horizons, author of Everything is Possible, a presenter, a speaker, and an advisor to various government agencies, businesses, and charities. I mean, that's a pretty impressive CE. More importantly than this, Martyn for me encapsulates a human being whose positivity, spirit, and good humor lights up every room he enters. He's just an all-round legend. In season 1, I started each session laying out why each session was relevant right now, specifically in the COVID context. For this one, however, it's always been important. As marketers, it's our job to cut through, to solve a customer problem and have our message heard. Getting the right message to the right audience is therefore crucial. In this session, we'll investigate just that. It's as simple as that. This session will run with a presentation and then we'll have Q&A afterwards. Although if you do have your questions, whack them in the Q&A right now or throughout the course of the session, because we'll be addressing them at the end and we'll be just taking them from the top. So like literally just get them in and then we'll be answering any questions as we go. As ever, I just encourage you to stay positively lovely with your questions. Finally, I just want to thank the sponsors. We started season 1 in a position where we were like, let's reinvent the marketing meetup in such a way where we can make sure that people get on board. With season 2, we start with incredible sense of momentum, and that momentum is enabled through the sponsors getting behind us. So it's truly so important that we just take the time to sort of appreciate them. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth here because I've spent some time in the pre-email and I will do in the follow-up email sort of highlighting what these folks do. But I do want to say a big thanks to Pitch, Content Cal, Fiverr, Redgate, Cambridge Martin College, Lido, Brand, Further, Third Light and Human. My only ask is thank them for helping us out. They're truly appreciated. You may have heard my dog making a big stretch down there as well while that was going on. He sat at my feet, so sorry if there's any snoring. So with all that said, Andy and Martyn, it's over to you, chaps.
Thank you very much, Joe. And yeah, thank you everyone for taking a bit of time this morning. Massively appreciated. So I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing, and we'll dive right in because we're going to keep this pretty fast paced as it's 8:30 in the morning in the UK. So we're going to dive right in. And this presentation is in two parts, as Joe already mentioned. So the first part is the more kind of nerdy, tactical, content strategy orientated thing. So I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process of achieving what we term here at Content Cal as of content-driven growth. That's something that we've been advocates of since the outset. And the second part of the presentation, as you already mentioned, going to hand over to Martyn, and he's definitely going to be doing the more interesting part of the presentation. Only met Martyn maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very, very pleased I did, because one, he's going to inspire you, and two, he's going to open your mind to a new audience that you potentially have not considered before. So with that said, let's kind of start with this. Now, Joe's already mentioned, so I'm very, very pleased and very proud, if I'm honest, because over the last 3 years, we launched Content Cal at the beginning of 2017. It's now used by 40,000 businesses in 140 countries. So that sounds impressive. Obviously, there's still a long way to go, but really that's been achieved by something called content-driven growth, essentially an organic first content-driven strategy that I'm going to take you through the processes of today. Now, with that out the way, I'm going to show you a stat I'm distinctly less proud of. So there is a free trial in Content Cal, and 71% of people that sign up to Content Cal never create any content. So this stat still makes me cry. And the reason for this is, well, I guess there's 3 reasons for it, but I'm going to show you a screenshot of Content Cal. Now, it's a blank canvas. For some people, this is the perfect place to paint their content strategy, to organize all of their campaigns across multiple channels and have complete transparency and organization related to it. But for 71% of those people that sign up, however, it's just overwhelmed. This is like a kind of canvas of limitless possibility. And that is a challenge that we all face as marketers. In the kind of preamble to this, we were talking about how to get the right content to the right people at the right time. And in that, it might sound really simple, but in that there is limitless possibilities. So quite frankly, we see people getting overwhelmed and think, actually, there's just so much to consider here. People just don't know where to start. So essentially, inertia becomes a de facto way of approaching it. And really, when we've dived into why these 71% of people never create any content, it really goes down to 3 core barriers. And that's, I don't have any time to do it. I don't have enough ideas. I don't know what to do. And I'm worried about what I would post, and what should I post? How will people perceive me? And that's certainly, had a bit of a magnifying glass over it over the last 3 months as well, the whole kind of fear and reputational risk associated with content. So with that, what we're going to try and do in this session over the next 15 minutes is break down those 3 barriers and ultimately get you to a point where, whether you use Content Cal or not, or just plan your strategy on something else, doesn't matter. Ultimately, getting to a point where you've got all of the ideas, the strategies, the targeting, all of the things that you need to create that perfect strategy. Now, to frame this session, we're going to go through this 6-step strategy that essentially has governed how we've marketed our business and how we, talk to others and, our customers about suggesting ways for them to market their business. So we've created this 6-step content strategy. Essentially, many people have different flavors of. We've just put it in a wheel and shoehorned everything to begin with C. But ultimately, so it starts with customer, and then we go into context. So essentially, what are those customers interested in? Going into the creativity element, how do we create messages based on the customer research and what they're interested in? How do we then get a broader team involved in the collaboration stage? Channels, where do we publish this? Not just about social, this is about email, this is about webinars, this is about blogs, this is about YouTube, whatever. So thinking about our channels from a broader perspective. And then of course, the calculation, the understanding of the performance off the back of it. And if anyone's seen me talk before, they'll know that I love tools, and I particularly love tools that we can all use for free today, because ultimately over the next 15 minutes, if you can't implement the stuff, if you deem it appropriate, that is, if you can't implement the stuff that I talk about immediately, then I have failed. So I'm going to give you the strategies and the tools to do it. So if you think that this works for you, then you'll be able to run away with this straight away without incurring any additional cost, which is good too. So let's start with customer. And in this scenario, we're going to talk about a fictitious coffee shop scenario where we have no following already. We have nothing essentially, and we need to create a market from scratch. So that's the story we're going to take, and we're going to start with step one of our customer research. And this is where we use the first of these free tools. We use Ubersuggest here. Now, two other tools are really good for this, like SEMrush and Ahrefs as well, but ultimately Ubersuggest is free, loads of value in that. Anyway, so we're going to search coffee shop because essentially what we want to understand in our category is there good search intent, because before we create any content, we need to make sure that there is a market there for it. So we can see, there is large search volume, particularly in the UK, for coffee shop. All good, right? But of course, that's not really going to tell us much other than the very high level. We need to take a deeper look into that. So here we're going to look at the keyword ideas, sticking with Ubersuggest. So those keyword ideas build out on coffee shop and start to tell you the kind of things that people are searching around that. As you can see, lots of it is very location specific. Coffee shop near me, nearby, London, Amsterdam, Covent Garden, etc. So what our first clue is here is that actually the location is just as important as the fact that this is a coffee shop. So that's already a first clue as to something to talk about in our content, because location specific content is going to be key to driving ranking and driving engagement here. So that's our first clue. But of course, that gives us a few keyword ideas. We can already jot down that idea to say that location specific content already, we're getting a clue is going to be important, but we want to take a bit of a deeper look. So we're going to go onto our second free tool, which is called keyword.io. So keyword.io, don't even need to create an account on, and essentially it does what it says on the tin. So these keyword.io will generate you your what we term as long tail keywords. So long tail keywords is typically a more natural search that you do on Google. So you wouldn't just search coffee shop, you would search, what's the best coffee shop, or, if you're searching around the term coffee, because we want to go a bit broader with our content, people aren't just searching the word coffee, they're searching like best ways to do things or questions about coffee, right? So here, there's a whole bunch of keywords that have been generated. And what we can do within keyword.io, we can start to look at the trends that we're already seeing to emerge. So lots around kind of how-to orientated content. So like recipes, and also lots around bulletproof coffee, for example, which if you know what that is, you'll know that it doesn't sound very pleasant. Lots of health and wellness type of orientated content as well, like can I do this on this diet, is it good while breastfeeding, that kind of thing. So there's lots of queries around health and wellness. There's also lots of questions around sustainability, so questions around reuse of coffee cups. So already now we're starting to generate 4 potential themes here. We've got like a how-to theme, we've got kind of locations, we've got like sustainability, and we've got health and wellness. So within about 5 minutes of doing research, already we've got like 4 potential themes we can start to build out on. And as you'll see as I go through this talk, themes is so critical when it comes to building a content plan. Understanding those different topics is going to be key to guiding success. Anyway, so let's take a quick side step. So sticking with step 1 and the customer thing, what we want to do is kind of take a step back and take a broader look at our market. I'm going to come out of our case study around this coffee shop for a scenario and for this moment, and talk about a scenario where we're using Content Cal. So this is where I show you something else that is I'm not that proud of, to be honest. But anyway, so I'm going to show Content Cal, look at our product description, look at our competitors. And essentially what we want to understand is doing competitor benchmarking. How do we stack up against our competitors? Because we already analyze how we're stacking up in the market, what the search volumes are and the keywords. So now we want to understand how we compare. So first thing to look at is share of voice. So share of voice, us versus our biggest competitor. Our growth rates are good, but yeah, tiny little share. So you either look at that and feel slightly depressed, or you look at that and go, wow, there's a lot to get here. And depending on my mood of that day, it can depend on which way I think about it. But anyway, share of voice ultimately is the amount of times that you're mentioned in the broader market. So how many times you're mentioned on reviews, on social, across everywhere. So this gives you a real nice, clear benchmarking picture to say, right, there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's also a lot of work we've got to do. Then we can look at share of voice reach. Oh, actually, just sidestep, I haven't even told you what tool this is. This is called Awario. So Awario, there is a 14-day free trial. hammer that 14-day free trial, and you won't need to use it or pay for it. Just don't tell them I said that. But anyway, share of voice, reach. So reach is the ultimate possibility of the broader audience you can potentially reach. So as an example, if one of your competitors' followers spoke about your competitor, reach encompasses all of the followers of that individual. So mentions is factual, talks about how many times you're mentioned, whereas reach talks about possibility. How big is that broader pool of opportunity? So this is great for helping you understand like your audience that you're gaining over time. How is that impacting your ability to influence? So this is a really important benchmarking exercise that you may want to revisit. I suggest you probably revisit once a quarter. Going deeper into it, we can start to look at where those mentions and where that reach is coming from. So this is key to channel strategy. So you can start to look at, is it blogs, is it emails, is it YouTube, is it Reddit that your competitors are doing well on? And you could take two potential looks on this. You could either take a view where there's a lot of opportunity on Twitter because Hootsuite are killing it and we could just go after them, or we could think about when competitors zig, we should zag. So, we might want to take YouTube or Instagram as a channel for ourselves. And then we've also got the most influential individuals, which is key to kind of gaining that reach and gaining that share of voice that we've just been talking about. So a fantastic way to potentially build those relationships in. So lots of research at the customer stage. But here at this point, what we've got is a great understanding of our broader market, what our customers are potentially interested in, some themes, and where we stack up against our competitors. So that goes on to step 2, which is context. And this is the biggest part of this session. It gets quicker after this section. So context is about going deep into the interests of our customers. And this is where the 4th tool comes in, called answerthepublic.com. We'll be sharing all of these tools after this as well, so you don't necessarily need to note them all down. Answerthepublic.com, fairly well known, but ultimately this is all of the searches that have happened on Google related to a search term. This is another way to generate all our themes and our topics, and you can start to see, you'll probably see some slightly random questions that I'm definitely not reading out, but you'll see some that are related to, the themes that we already started generating, like how-to, sustainability, wellness. And actually what you see is some kind of random trends appearing, like lots of questions around like the best coffee machine to buy. So already we're starting to think about our content from a much broader perspective. Whereas being a coffee shop, we might just think, oh, come in for our latest soya latte as our content. I mean, what should we talk about? We've got no followers. But ultimately now our mind is starting to be open to the fact that actually there is a huge amount of areas of interest for the people that are in our market that are coffee drinkers ultimately. And content marketing could also be called customer first marketing, right? Because essentially we're building messaging purely based off the interests of our ideal target market. So great to build out the themes here, but even better, we can just download this to Excel. When we've downloaded it to Excel, this is where the 5th tool comes in. I'll mention Content Cal, but ultimately you can do this on Excel or Trello or something as well. So you don't have to use Content Cal. So what we've done is taken all of the ideas from answerthepublic.com, and basically we've just put it in a little folder called content themes, and that's given us a whole year's worth of content inspiration. So whenever we're short of an idea, we can just go there. So that kind of content themes folder just lives at the top of our planner there. So it's always, within a click. And that's a key thing about doing this research. That research that you do needs to be integrated as a daily habit as to when you're implementing your strategy. So the tool you're using for implementing your strategy needs to have reference points to all of your research. Because we see so often that people do good research and it sits on a Google Doc somewhere and never gets surfaced again. So it just needs to become a daily habit whereby you do your research and you implement that research together. Cool. So of course, if you want to drive reach when you don't have following, you're going to need to do hashtag research and use hashtags wisely. I'm just going to show an Instagram hashtag tool that I like called displaypurposes.com. Search the word coffee. It's going to tell you the most relevant and popular hashtags related to that. Hashtags are now, actually, just as a side note, hashtags are now becoming a thing again on Facebook. So that's worthwhile considering. There's no hashtag tools that are really good for Facebook just yet because it's still quite new. Same for LinkedIn. But for Twitter hashtag research, I would use hashtagify.me. So hashtag ify.me. So both of those are going to give you great opportunities to make sure you're using the right hashtags. Don't just use hashtags related to your own business. I see so many people doing that. Use hashtags that are relevant to your target market. So when we've used those hashtags, we can just save them in Content Cal so that we don't actually have to go ahead and find them again. Further to my point of when you're doing your research, make sure you're implementing it. And also the category tags relate to the themes that we've just been speaking about, like, you know, health and wellness, sustainability, your how-tos, recipes. So all of that can now be started to be categorized and color coded in our plan. So we can make sure that, one, we've got a good color coded plan so we know the volume of content we've got planned across all channels. But secondly, and most importantly, is that we can start to analyze the performance of this content related to that category tag. And that is critical. So talking about good use of hashtags, of course, that folds into your kind of national days and key days. So, you know, for example, if it's National Password Day, for example, you know that if this is relevant to your business, that hashtag is going to trend and will likely give you additional reach. So making sure in your calendar, you've got everything organized related to these national days. You can browse this calendar, you can export this calendar as well, so that you can start to really be proactive to make sure if there's an opportunity upcoming, you know, next month, you're not going to miss it ultimately. So doing this plan at the outset will mean that content creation becomes so much easier as you go through it. So quick side step here, Google Alerts. If no one uses Google Alerts today, I definitely recommend you do that. You can find it just by, you know, Googling Google Alerts. And essentially, I use this personally for tracking competitor mentions and tracking mentions of our own brand. But also in this scenario, what we can do is track, you know, the most relevant and topical things related to the business that we're operating. So in this scenario, the coffee shop. So that Google Alert means that you don't have to, you know, think every day I've got to go out and research. The latest news is just going to be sent to your inbox. So you can do that on a daily or weekly basis. Now, a good example of this is this. I set up this alert for this coffee shop. Email came in, latest article related to coffee. Of course, that search term's a bit broad. You probably want to be a bit more specific than that. But ultimately, here, what we can do is just take this article. And if you can see where my mouse is in the top right, there's a little Content Cal extension. So for Chrome, what you can do, if you find an interesting article, press that button, and that's just going to go take that article and save it to what we call this Content Hub. We built this Content Hub towards the end of last year, just purely as a repository for all of those things that you find when you're going across the web. You think, that's an interesting idea. You just want to pin it and save it somewhere. So same if you're, you know, familiar with using Pinterest, you kind of pin these things to your kind of ideas pinboard. And it's a real similar concept to that. So a great way to curate content. So that's the context piece. So now we've got a great understanding of what our customers are looking for in the market, using Answer the Public for that, making sure we're using great use of hashtags, not just from doing good hashtag research on things like displaypurposes.com, but also using days of the year to make sure that we're using, you know, tactical opportunities that are coming up. So now we go into creativity. Now, this is a huge subject which we could cover in its own right. So I'm going to give you 3 ways just to make that a bit easier. So we all know that video content is absolutely critical at the moment, and we know that typically social media platforms favor video content. So Lumen 5 is a really good, simple tool for those that are not that familiar with video content. So Lumen 5, great for you doing really simple creatives. They've got stock video library. You can upload your own video. Here's just a little video I'd uploaded before, and we can just put a little bit of narrative over it. Just a really nice way to create more video content, mix up the content in your social media feeds without too much kind of overhead if you don't have the time to do it. And there's a free version of this too. But more importantly though, going back to the Content Hub, this is a critical part for creativity. Jotting down all of your ideas as you develop them, it's incredible how much that collapses the time it takes to create content. And also when you're using these category tags, when you've got those defined themes like how-tos, health and wellness, sustainability, it kind of puts some guide rails for you. So we were talking about that blank calendar and the overwhelm of thinking, I don't know what to do. When you've now got these 5 themes that kind of orientate you to say, right, I'm now going to create content across these 5 themes. Here's some ideas I've jotted in related to these themes. The barriers to creating content suddenly get a lot lower. The creative juices start flowing. And then continuing on with these creative juices here, we're looking at previous posts also within Content Hub. So we can look at our top performing content previously, so we can start to look at things that we might want to reuse and repurpose. Repurposing is a key part of a good content strategy. Just as a quick side note, recently we started to go through a process of updating our older blog content, and it's had such incredible benefit for our search rankings and how the Google algorithm puts that in its kind of search volume. So we're starting to appear on page 1 since we started up retroactively updating older pieces of content and older blog posts. So, but then let's go on to collaboration. That is a key part of this whole ideation process, because the key here, and this is an opportunity that many people miss when it comes to content creation, is that the best content is always created together. So being able to take content from, when you have an idea on your phone, you're just saving it somewhere, links that you might find, an instant message chat that you've had with a colleague on Slack or Microsoft Teams, or something that you've had a conversation in email, all of that needs to be pulled into one central location. I mean, you can do that with Content Cal, but of course, finding a process to do this is critical, because essentially this creates a funnel of ideas for your business. Because ultimately what we want to do is have this single content hub of all these ideas streaming in from different parts of the business, different instant message chats, people sending ideas on email, ultimately meaning that social media and content creation doesn't happen in a silo. So that's a critical part. Collaboration will create better content. So then we get to the channel part. So here now we've got our content plan, we've got our days planned out, we've got our content themes organized, we've got kind of key people we want to mention in our content. All of our research is kind of now manifested into a plan. We then bring in all of those ideas we started developing in Content Hub, the links that we've found using that Chrome extension, ideas shared by other members of the team. And ultimately now we can start creating our content, organizing it related to these themes and these topics that we've been talking about. And that then takes it into the calculation stage, where we can start to track, once a month, how has the content that we've produced impacted our analytics? I'm showing you Content Cal Analytics, but please, don't just think Content Cal Analytics is the only place for this, because you'll need to supplement this with GA, Google Analytics as well, to make sure that it's having the net benefit in terms of increasing traffic to your site too, or whatever your key objectives are. But here we can understand how your audience has grown, how your audience breakdown is shifting. So are you seeing better growth from LinkedIn versus Twitter, for example? How engagement is growing over that time. So this is a great kind of indicator as to the topics you're talking about are of critical importance, looking at the best time to post, and also bringing in these different category tags so you can start to understand the types of content that is performing the best. So we should do more from how-tos, more from sustainability or health and wellness. So we can really start to orientate our content strategy in a way that's driving results. So that kind of puts it all together into a 6-step content strategy, which of course we've always known that it's always about having great relevancy. That's driven through fantastic research. So doing the kind of customer and context sides of that 6-step content strategy, and then making sure it becomes a daily habit and that achieves consistency by having a good process for creativity and how you and a broader team share ideas, how you can maximize this across channels and start to track your performance across multiple channels, not just social, and then how you can analyze all of that at a content theme level so that you can start to orientate your strategy and make tweaks as appropriate. So that is me done. So here's how you can get in touch here. Feel free to either drop me an email, mention us across on social here. Here's our Twitter handles. Or if you fancy giving Content Cal a try, then you're more than welcome to try the free trial. But at this stage, what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to Martyn, because as I promised, that's the nerdy tactical bit to create the strategy. Now it's time to be inspired by an individual that Joe and I know are very pleased that we've both met. So Martyn, over to you, my man.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you both for the kind words and for the opportunity to get involved. And I can see the comments, everyone watching it is loving it. And I was hooked in there as well, Andy. So many amazing bits of advice. So yeah, really cool to get cracking here. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got two different slide decks, but we're gonna whistle through quite quickly through both. So yeah, I think that as you sort of set the scene already, Andy, we're gonna be at a point where I'm going to start with the personal story. To get back to the beginning, that's sorted. So for anyone that was at the Cambridge meetup, I spoke at, some of the slides and my personal story will be familiar, but you know, bit of a reminder or refresher. But really, a lot since I spoke at that last Cambridge event, a lot has happened with me co-founding Purple Go, and very much the insights into disabled people and disabled consumers as a very large, viable audience for businesses to reach and to be learning from, and creating products and services for, and to include in advertising and marketing. So for those that saw the first few slides, the second half is the newer, updated news and some really interesting statistics. But I think by sharing my story, it places disability. I think there's a lot of history around the narrative of disability, and that we think of charity and we think of sympathy and pity. And I think a lot of my work, regardless of what business or project I'm involved in, it's really just about trying to change the narrative that disability is around talent, it's around value, it's around capability. And I think one powerful way to express this is just through my personal story. So as it says, growing up with a disability, I was born with spinal muscular atrophy, which sort of sits under muscular dystrophy, which is a bit more commonly known disability. It basically means I'm always in my wheelchair in the daytime, and I have to have a thing called a hoist to lift me in and out of the chair. I have a care team that help me with all of my daily living tasks. So sort of to frame it, you know, physically, I am very weak. But as we'll go on to share, life has not got me down, and I've done lots of amazing personal achievements and you know, professional achievements as well. But yeah, growing up, just very much around sort of navigating all those elements of independent living, and going to school, and you know, going off clubbing, and how there were no accessible taxis in Cambridge when I grew up. So I think it's just really key to see those barriers that maybe those that don't know someone with a disability don't always realize, that you know, there are the health balances, there are these barriers in society. But even so, even though we have to be aware and look to reduce and pull down these barriers so everybody is included, yeah, it's still not to go down that bless them, the sort of pity, sympathy route. And I think that balance is really key. And I think the world, as we go forward, you know, through my journey, the world definitely has got far better with embracing difference and diversity. And you know, D&I, diversity and inclusion, has become a very sort of hot topic. But I also want to impress that when we come onto the business side later, it really is an absolute business opportunity, and it's not just social good or corporate social responsibility or PR. It's an absolute opportunity within a business bottom line side of things with disability. So yeah, one of my defining moments of my story was my operation was I was 15 and I was in hospital for about a month, and I had to have titanium rods put in my back to hold me sort of more up straight, because I was really getting a curvature of the spine. But the relevance of that is that was when I dreamt up all the things that I wanted to go on and do in life. It was that adversity and that challenge, but a sort of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I know a lot of the things I went on to do, I dreamt up during that challenging time of life. So independence and freedom is a very important thing for me. That picture is me driving my adapted car. So I'm in my wheelchair, I get in the car with a ramp that I stay in the wheelchair throughout the process. And as you can see, all those kind of space age controls enabling me to to drive the vehicle. And so it's a metaphor for what I'm about to talk about of independence and freedom, but it's quite literally has been a big part of my independence and freedom with driving. And so, yeah, my independence has always been built around these 4 pillars: to have the funding and the care team, to have the funding and the equipment like my wheelchair and hoist. Housing has been very difficult, trying to find a supply of adapted, accessible housing. But again, thankfully, there are rules and regulations that ensure new houses are built to be more inclusive of everybody. And transport. So when I lived in London, the tube is only 1/3 accessible, the stations. So it was quite tricky, to say the least, navigating what was my home city for 5 years when I was working for the charity Scope. But yeah, again, once we look at the barriers, once we understand the needs of disabled people, then things have been improved, and there are workarounds and there are ways to ensure that transport is doable. And so I suppose in a way I've touched upon health, like the operation. I've touched upon independent living, just me being able to be empowered and to do the things I want to do by having those inputs. But also inclusion is a big factor. And I've talked already about barriers. So I always say that I have a medical condition called spinal muscular atrophy, but I'm actually disabled by the barriers in society. And those barriers are under 3 areas. There's the physical environment. So steps disable me. But when there's a ramp or a lift, I'm not disabled because I'm in my wheelchair and I can then enter the building or enter the train. The second type of barrier is attitude. So when people presume that I'm not capable or less capable just because I'm sat in a wheelchair, that disables me. But when people just want to get to know me as Martyn and not have any preconceived stereotypes, I'm not disabled anymore. And the third is around policies and procedure, which starts to lean us more into business. That if a policy like a recruitment policy factors in blind applicants, then you're not disabling that group of people to go for that job. And you'll very often find that there are many people in the blind community that are amazing talent and able to do the job, better than other potential candidates. So we're just having to reframe how these barriers have stopped people being part of the conversation and part of everyday life. But the opportunity when we pull those barriers down is so big for everybody, for government, for the economy, for businesses. And of course, the right thing to do. I mean, I obviously started on my journey talking about the moral argument, but I think I've learned that the business case of inclusion is where we're getting a lot more action now, whereas it was just a lot more talking and lip service when it was the right thing to do. And I think that's an important point to make, because I've spent 15 years of my career raising awareness, but the business case is really moving things now. And then I've added their self-esteem and confidence and skills and knowledge, because of course disabled people like myself, we have to be able to embrace these opportunities. The more opportunities become available, and so there's obviously work to be done around those things within the disabled community, which has been a big part of my work and my history as well. So yeah, on a personal level, I've been able, because of all those bits I've just talked about, to go to Australia, San Francisco, to Barcelona, where I've worked quite a lot, to Japan with my fiance Kasia. I've done skiing, adapted skiing in Catalonia. I'm whistling through because there's a few more slides I want to make sure we get through, but I think it's just really important to show that's me flying a plane, that's me in a hot air balloon, and that's me tree climbing, just literally hanging with my 130 kilogram wheelchair from a tree in the New Forest, because why not? And in the end, that they were all things I wanted to do for me and my personal growth, my, get out the comfort zone, being a little bit crazy maybe. But you can imagine a younger disabled person, this is very amazing to have a role model that shows what is possible. But it's also what I've learned as I started my blog, and we'll come on to giving back now, was I started blogging in 2009 on martynsibley.com, and the audience that I never factored in when I started blogging was that non-disabled people are quite taken by my story, and that it shows them what's possible. And I think that's also an important point, that particularly as marketers, we love to segment, quite rightly. I love segmenting, but when we label, we sometimes create a division. I think publicly, disabled, non-disabled, we're all human. And I think that my personal journey, the power of sharing that is that it connects, and it just brings us all into, we're all people, we all have goals, we all have ambitions. Not everyone will want to hang in a tree, fine, I get that. But it is really powerful that we have to see disabled people as customers, as employees, as entrepreneurs, not as that group that was more around charity and segregation. And so my blog has achieved some of that social change. Disability Horizons is our media platform, so it's content by the community for the community. I co-founded Accommable, which is, we called it Airbnb for disabled people. We vetted different accommodations around the world to make it easier for disabled travelers to book accommodation and trust that it was going to do what they needed it to do. And after some grants and angel investment, we sold it to Airbnb. So kind of a happy fairy tale. You can appreciate what I just said in 10 seconds was not that easy. It was 2 years of a hell of a lot of work and trials and tribulations. And we could probably make our disabled founders version of the Facebook story one day. But it actually showed that, disabled entrepreneurs could raise money, and it showed that there was a viable market for a product like travel accommodation. And ultimately that Airbnb understood the viability of that market as well. So yeah, I've done consultancy for government, business, charities, and then been voted as an influencer in the top 5 list of disabled people. So I'm going to stop that deck there and move it on to, sort of more what we've been talking about on the business and marketing side. So Purple Go is the agency I co-founded 2-3 months ago. Nothing about us without us. Our tagline is really important, because what we're doing, we're putting disabled influencers at the center of the conversation, or even more, we're putting disabled consumers at the center of the conversation. But as we'll learn here, the business reason for this is that 22% of the population have a disability, which is a lot. I think people don't quite realize the numbers. So that's more than 14 million people in the UK. And when we look at this graph of 18 to 30-year-olds, there's over 9 million, students 2.4 million, vegans 600,000. And when I started talking to my co-founders at the GOAT agency, and I was saying that I've been on a train ride, and every train station there was billboards about vegan burgers, which it was brilliant. I loved it. We're catering for all different audiences. But then as we come down, we've got the spend. So £250 billion a year in the UK, $8 trillion globally. So the spending power of this market is massive, but just 0.06% of adverts feature disabled people. And when we look at that graph above, it just doesn't add up that brands are catering to the 600,000 vegan market, but they're not at all aware of the 14 million in the UK people with a disability. So that's what we're essentially trying to solve on a social impact level. But I think we're really clear that this is a massive, massive business opportunity. And there's a big thing when COVID kicked in, calling disabled people and those with health conditions that were more susceptible to the virus vulnerable. Now we get the context that vulnerable to the virus, but as marketeers, we understand the power of branding, right? So I don't want to be the vulnerable guy. I want to be the guy that does all the things we've just talked about before. So it's a big thing about the value and also not the vulnerability. And what we've learned is that disabled people really want to be marketed to in the right way. And so why are brands ignoring them or us as someone from the community? It's all about brands not knowing how to do it, being scared. So they'd rather just not act and not take that risk. But that's why we've created Purple Goat, is to give that, you know, expertise and that insight and that knowledge. So I don't want to do too much of the specifics of what Purple Goat is, but it's essentially, you know, the wants and needs of disabled people, and doing lots of what other marketing and branding agencies do, but where disabled people are at the center of that conversation. For those that don't know, the Goat Agency are the world's leading social marketing agency. They're global, working with some really, really big brands. There's a few of them there. And what's been really amazing with our partnership is that I've got the global advertising agency of the Goat wrapped around me, but I'm the majority shareholder and the CEO of Purple Goat. So it enables me to build a team of disabled marketers and to really, make this a real thing and work with brands big and small. And we do all the usual things like consultancy, research, marketing and media. For anyone that's got questions on influencer marketing, happy to talk through the power of working with influencers for not just amplifying, but for creating really rich, powerful content, and also just around events and around insights that the disabled influencers that we work with are enabling us to do that. But of course, you know, separate to disability, influencer marketing is becoming a very powerful way of doing marketing and social marketing, but working with people that are, you know, able to really drive that from a community. And back to that point about nothing about us without us. Listen to the community, get real business results. And it's so important that that comes across, that it is a business opportunity. It's not another awareness raising or a CSR project. It's all about improving the bottom line. So that's the end of my slides. And I think we got a few minutes for some questions as well. So it's amazing we could get through all of that information. And just, thank you once again for the opportunity.
Unbelievable. Thank you so much to both of you. I don't know whether, I guess you've both been speaking through, but I hope you've been able to also catch the amount of amazing comments coming your way as well. Both of you have just had so much. A couple even said it's the best webinar they've ever attended. So
wow,
that's really sweet. So thank you, both of you. Folks, there are a number of open questions here. If you have any, also please get them in the Q&A feature, which is found down the bottom. You can use the thumbs up feature to get the questions that you want answered to the top. So please do that, because we've only got about 10 minutes or so for questions. So want to get through them all. Andy, I'm already recognizing a problem here that you're still muted. So there we go. I could wait for the... So we've got 10 minutes for questions, and there's one here that's very clearly risen to the top. So we'll start with the question, any tips for LinkedIn research specifically? And I'm going to also sort of ask if you could just speak about the opportunity presented by LinkedIn right now, just in case a few folks are unfamiliar. I think if we start with Andy and then Martyn, I know that you use the platform a lot too, so go ahead.
How to answer this concisely. So LinkedIn are pretty stingy when it comes to giving other third parties data. However, they have released a new update to their analytics tools, of which I was going to share. We probably don't have any time to do it. But if you go into your page on LinkedIn, look at followers, and you'll see some new follower metrics. It was last week that they released an ability for you to see the precise followers that you've gained within a given week or month, because that is a fantastic way for you to absolutely see it at a person by person level. Are you attracting the right audience, which is absolutely critical. No other network offers that level of granularity when you're making sure that you're hitting the right target audience. So perfect way to adjust your strategy. You'd have to do that natively on LinkedIn. For other LinkedIn analytics as well, there's a great tool which is paid for, but it's called shield.ai, so Shield Analytics. They're the only one that I'm aware of that have found a way to get LinkedIn data off it, including from personal profiles, which is a bit of a game changer. So that's really cool. So go check that out. Tell them I sent you, because the CEO will be very happy about that. So the second part of it is just last week, LinkedIn released a guide for LinkedIn's guide to doing virtual events on the platform, because LinkedIn have done so much around events, both from like doing the inviting, the whole registration process, and the delivery of these events through LinkedIn Live. So LinkedIn are going big on this. So if you've got a community like Joe has created with the marketing meetup, or not even at that level, to be honest with you, if you've got a community of more than 1,000 people or 1,000 followers on your page, you're likely to get LinkedIn Live. And I think as the attitude for physical events, I don't see that changing until next year. I would definitely recommend reading that guide. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll be posting that guide in about the next 45 minutes. So that's my update on that.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been very powerful. I use Streamyard to do a daily live stream. So I'm interviewing thought leaders and influencers in the disability world every weekday at noon. And obviously that's a great way of connecting and meeting amazing people. It positions me as a thought leader and connector and all of those sort of social proof signals that are really important to put out to the world. And so StreamYard goes to my Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. It's 40 quid a month for having more than one channel, so that there is a cost if you do more than one, but you could just go obviously on LinkedIn and not have to pay anything. And so what I've found is that obviously I'm in a massive business to business push with the agency. So I've connected with, marketing people, and I'm, working at disability brands like wheelchair manufacturers, adapted holidays, but also, we're going to be working and we're starting to have really good conversations with tier 1 brands. Now we're more settled and established. So for example, I connected with a high up marketing lead at Xbox because accessible gaming is really a big thing. And after a week of just letting him consume my daily live stream, I then just sent him a message. We've had a couple of calls. They're looking to onboard us, and I'm going to be speaking to all the marketing managers in the EMEA region. And then that's led to talks with Microsoft Teams and LinkedIn themselves. But that's all because of a live stream and just hitting someone up on private messenger on LinkedIn.
That's amazing. What a story.
That's how to do it.
Yeah, that'll do it, Martyn. I mean, like, that's I just get the sense that I think we were speaking earlier, and even though you sort of described yourself as, new to the marketing world in the sense of running an agency specifically, then you're probably one of the world's most natural marketers, that I've ever met. There's a good question here from Phil, actually, who mentions that much of disability is invisible. And of course, that's something we hear a lot about, is the invisible disabilities. How do you go about addressing that in your marketing? Or more specifically, rather than giving a definite answer, how have you gone about addressing invisible disabilities in your marketing?
Yeah, I mean, this for me is the market. So marketing is a vehicle to change narrative. Seth Godin talks about this all the time, but also marketing 101 is speak to your audience, understand the needs, make any necessary changes, and then tell that audience that you're there for them and you represent them, and you all of that stuff we know, but people just forget to do it with disability. So the art, nothing about us without us, is if a charity or a brand want to reach out to people with a hidden disability, that's why we work with influencers. I haven't got an invisible disability, so I would not be the expert, but we have a massive network of disabled influencers. So we would bring them in both as consultants, but also we would then create content and amplify with people from those communities. And obviously you would segment invisible disabilities down into all sorts of sub-segments as well. So it's totally marketing 101 applied to the audience of disabled people.
That's wonderful. And I think that answers a question from Alex Kington as well, who says the same could be applied for race, gender, sexuality,
Absolutely.
whatever it may be. It sort of goes down to...
Yeah, and I think like my point about we're all human, like this should just have been part of the marketing strategy of all businesses and brands from day dot. But for all sorts of different cultural, political, economic reasons, there are certain groups and communities that are still fighting for equity in all sorts of ways. And so that's why Purple Goat is needed, to bring disability into the conversation. But the goal is that it's just, you know, it's just about communities, and that's the segmentation, not this sort of groups of division that we sometimes get from the media.
I love that. Thank you. So we've got a question from Tom, who directs it specifically at Andy, who says tools like keyword.io look good, but he's interested, why not just use Google Keyword Planner?
Yeah, so you could use both, essentially do the same thing. I like keyword.io because it allows you to kind of organize certain types of keywords and bucket them. And plus you don't need to create any login or account for it. You just use it. So I find it naturally better, but it does the same thing. They pull the same data. So it's, yeah, all good with me.
Sweet. That's a quick and easy answer to that. So something that both you two have done incredibly well over the course of every interaction I've ever had with you is that you're two of the most you individuals that I've ever met, i.e. you're very comfortable in your own skin, and you're happy to put out your content in a way that represents you as individuals as well, rather than just corporates or companies or whatever it may be. Now, this may be something that you're doing very naturally, but to the theme of authenticity in your content, do you have any sort of like thought processes that people could sort of look to take on when thinking, how can I inject a little bit of me into this content rather than it just being this sort of standoffish piece of content around the theme of ... Does that make sense as a question? Sweet. Andy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's quite a hard question to answer because essentially it's uniquely personal. But the only way I found of doing it is because I naturally struggled a lot with self-confidence, as I'm sure a lot of people do. But just recording me continually, it sounds really narcissistic, but recording me talking to my phone continually until you just get really comfortable with yourself and how you sound, because you're the one that judges you more than any others. So if you start to think, nah, okay, I'm just used to how I sound, how my teeth are wonky, and once I get used to all of that stuff, I'm like, you know, it's fine, because I've seen myself so much because I've just been looking at it on the phone. I've kind of honed that. And in terms of like being authentic, you know, my people often commented that I'm just full of energy and positive and happy. So then that's all I need to be in my content, really. So I'm just continually smile because there's enough miserable people. So and I like, you call me the huggiest man in social media, so I've lent into that. So
I've branded you, sorry.
Yeah.
Martyn?
Yeah, sort of building on from what Andy said, because I agree with everything there. I mean, I think for me, it's always been more about the mission of like knowing other disabled people, particularly younger disabled people, needed someone like me to step forward and share that personal story. And then, as we discussed earlier, for the rest of the world to see a different narrative of disability. So as much as I used to be sick before speaking on stage in my early 20s, and I, you know, when I started my blog, it was horrible writing about my life and videoing, making vlogs on my YouTube about what I got up to. But the reason I overcame that was there was some bigger need for this. It wasn't about me, it was about the cause. and then yeah, the practice makes perfect, and the more you do it, the more it just becomes more natural. But I think there's so many theories and philosophies, and you know, it's good to have the steps of a plan to share with people. But I think, like with Andy's talk earlier, like still creates that personal narrative around those steps. And I think that's what makes us all unique. It's that, you know, unique proposition is us as individuals. So if you don't lean into that, you are more vanilla. So there's a business benefit to being different and authentically unique.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Well, okay. So it's 9:31 and I'm seeing a few folks saying they'll have to go. So I think we're going to respect people's times in that way. But you know what, chaps, this has been incredible in so many ways. We've had the tactical elements, we've had strategy, and just like I'm going to be buzzing for the rest of the day from the inspiration provided too. So honestly, thank you so much for being part of this, the gratitude, and we'll just keep on gushing. So I'm going to stop there, but know how grateful I am. And likewise, thank you to everyone who's been here today. Season 2 has started off with a bang, and I couldn't be more proud. So thank you all for being here. Last thing from me is that you will have the follow-up email come out saying thank you for being there, also with the recording of the podcast for the blog. In there is also the link to all the sponsors. Please do take the time to check them out and thank them. Content Cal is among them, and there is also a code that you can use with Content Cal through the marketing meetup. So do check them out if you'd like to. So that being said, session 1 done. Thank you all. I love you all very, very much, and I look forward to either seeing you at Conversation Club on Friday or for the webinar next Tuesday. Take care of yourself, and thank you all. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers.